What's the most disturbing thing you have done to someone? My roommate got into it with our neighbor when we first moved in. Neighbor came over cussing at us because we were doing some work kind of late in the day. This was our first interaction with a guy who turned out to be a real piece of work. He had one of those golf course lawns and would spend entire weekends working on just one section. So my buddy bided his time, and 2 years later, he ordered 20,000 dandelion seeds and spread the all over his lawn late at night. A month or so later, he started tearing his hair out. It was great.
Sounds like your buddy had a plan. That neighbor must have been insufferable to deal with. Spending all that time on his lawn only to have it ruined like that. Classic. I can just picture the frustration building up over 2 years. Sometimes, quiet revenge hits harder than anything. But hey, it's just grass. Your friend handled it well, though. Must have felt good to see all that effort go to waste for the neighbor.
This is probably pretty tame, but in middle school, I had a friend who always came to school with horrible body odor. She also wore dirty clothes a lot. She smelled awful. I wrote an anonymous note and put it in her locker telling her she smelled bad. I don't think I was cruel in the letter, just really letting her know in case she didn't realize she obviously didn't. When she told me about it, I looked her in the face and told her that I couldn't believe someone would do that. She didn't smell bad after that.
I get that it's a tough situation. If you care about a friend, it's hard to just sit back and not say anything. It's good that she improved after that. Sometimes, tough love is just what someone needs to make a change. People can be oblivious to their own habits. Honestly, it's a fine line between helping and being harsh. But you did what you thought was right at the time.
In grade 4, was sitting in school assembly and was bored and messing around with a rubber band and a tightly rolled bit of paper B. Accidentally shot the kid sitting in front of me, point blank range, right in the back of the head. He sat there quietly sobbing for the next 15 minutes or so. His friends kept asking him what was wrong, but he didn't answer and kept on crying. I was gutless and legged it out of the assembly the moment it finished, without saying anything. Sad face.
I remember messing around in class too. One time, I flicked a paper ball at a friend. It hit him right in the face. He looked shocked, then just started laughing. It broke the tension. But I didn't have that reaction in your story. I would have probably just left the room too. Sometimes, it's easier to run than face the awkwardness. Kids can be tough on each other though.
After a night of hard drinking with my old roommate, he passed out on the couch with a big-ass glass of water beside him. So, before I went to sleep, I swapped it out for a big-ass glass of vodka, thinking it would be funny. I woke up in the morning to the sound of him vomiting fucking everywhere and shaking and just losing his shit. It was horrible, and I had to put up the cost to get our carpets cleaned, and I wasted all our vodka. Sorry, Brandon. Sad face.
That sounds like a rough night. It's wild how those moments can turn out. You think you're being funny, but it can backfire pretty hard. I'm sure Brandon learned his lesson though. Next time, maybe just stick to water. At least you got a story out of it, even if it wasn't the best one. It's always a risk with pranks, especially after a night of drinking.
This wasn't me, but a friend of mine. There was a girl that hung out with our group. She was a really nice person and fun to hang around. She was a bit on the thick side. Well, we all had a plan to take her out for her birthday and make a deal of it. Well, at the last minute, she flaked out on us to go do something with someone else, not her family. This really pissed off one of the guys in our group. So we set up and makeup day 3 days later. She shows up, we all have dinner, and do the cake and ice cream thing. When we get to the presents, we are all high school age, so we are all broke and just give her little things. Except for the guy who was pissed off. He brought this huge, heavy-ass box. Well, she opens this giant box last and starts bawling her eyes out. We thought it was going to be something great. Turns out he was really pissed off she ditched us. So he went out and got her 2 cases of Slim Fast.
That's wild. Your friend really went hard with that gift. It's a bold move, but I guess he wanted to make a point. It's not the best way to handle things, though. Her reaction must have been something else, crying over Slim fast. Shows how expectations can go sideways. At least they all got through it, even if it was awkward. Sometimes, you just never know how a situation is going to turn out.
Dated a girl, and we became friends after we broke up. She was seeing someone else, but told me he was very standoffish and always traveling. In our town, this was a big warning sign, as there were a lot of military guys who would cheat and use that excuse. Long story short, he was messing with her head, and I was randomly on her computer one day and saw an email from him. I googled his name/address and found out he lived nearby with his wife. I wrote an anonymous letter to his wife, detailing the affair, what email he used, and included some comments he sent. Never knew how it ended, but my friend dated other, better guys since then. TBH, it was half anger over my friend's heart, and half jealousy that the guy was getting the best of two worlds.
That's a pretty intense situation. It's wild how relationships can get complicated like that. Your friend was clearly being manipulated. It's good she moved on to better choices. I guess that mix of wanting to protect her and feeling that jealousy can drive someone to do unexpected things. Sending that letter must have felt like a risky move, but it seems like it paid off for her in the end.
After hooking up with a girl off of MySpace LOL, I tried to bail while she was in the shower. I walked down in her parking garage and got into my car and tried to leave, but the gate didn't have an auto sensor to open. I parked and tried to rush back to her place, but the parking garage also locked you in unless you had a key. I had to call her from the garage to let me out. Instant karma for me being a shitty person.
That's a classic case of getting caught in your own mess. You think you're being clever, but then life hits you with some unexpected consequences. Pretty funny how trying to dodge a situation just leads to more trouble. Calling her must have been awkward, but at least it taught you a lesson. Sometimes you just can't escape your choices.
First grade, standing by a wall at recess. Kid comes running past me. I stuck leg out and tripped him up. Asphalt. And he was hauling ass. He never saw it coming and landed face first. Off to the hospital. In the confusion, nobody knew what happened, and he had no memory of it. To this day, nearly 40 years later, I still don't know why I did it. There was no malice in my heart, no desire to see harm come to him. If you asked what happened, I'd say it was my leg that did it, not me. I just didn't think. I still remember that clearly and often, and I think about the pain I caused him. I wish I could take it back.
That's a heavy story. It's strange how a moment of thoughtlessness can have such a lasting impact. Kids often act without thinking through the consequences. It's interesting that it stuck with you. Maybe it's a reminder of how our actions, big or small, can affect others in ways we can't predict. We all have those moments we wish we could change. It shows personal growth and reflection over the years.
I was in 6th grade and was just dumped by this girl I was head over heels for. She immediately started dating a friend of mine. I had this crap from a magic kit that when added to water, it turns into this semi-solid gel goop. Basically the same stuff they put in diapers. I filled up 3 50 cubic centimeters syringes that my mom had brought home from the hospital with the crap and injected them both through the vent slot in her locker. It went all over her books and leather jacket. I waited to watch her reaction between passing period and saw her crying at her locker, holding all of her shit that was just basted in the slime. I felt like the lowest form of life on the planet. I didn't fess up and apologize for doing it until almost 5 years later in high school.
That's a pretty wild story. I can see how being hurt led to that reaction. It's one of those things where the initial thrill of revenge can turn into regret really quickly. Waiting 5 years to apologize shows how much it weighed on you. I'm sure that lesson stuck with you. People handle heartbreak differently, and sometimes we look back on our choices and realize they weren't the best.
More petty and a bit mean than fucked up, but there was this really popular, super hot girl who was in the year above me at school. I used to speak to her a bit. We were in a couple of the same classes, but she was snooty and quite mean to people, and so I never really liked her. Anyway, flash forward several years to another city. I was on a work night out in some bar. I turn around and see this girl standing there. She comes over to me and is all, "Oh my God, salty paws. It's me. Remember me?" I don't know why, but for some reason, I just decided to say, nope. Sorry. She's saying, "We were in blah, classes together. I used to sit next to blah, and we talked about." I just shrugged and said, just drawing a total blank here. I think I managed to convince her that I had actually completely forgotten who she was. I had a good laugh to myself about it afterward, but in hindsight, it was incredibly harsh.
That's a pretty interesting encounter. I mean, she clearly remembered you, but you just didn't want to engage. Sometimes, it's easy to hold on to past feelings, especially if someone wasn't nice. It's a bit funny how things play out years later. Just shows how we can choose to react in the moment. The whole thing probably felt satisfying, but I guess it also left you with that little nagging thought about how harsh it was.
I was on a road trip with a friend recently. Just for shits and gigs, before I got in the shower in a hotel we were staying in, I took a piss into one of the paper cups they leave for you, and I threw it in the microwave on high for 10 minutes. I came out of the shower, and he was sucking wine through the room's window that only tipped out a couple inches. In my defense, he's one of my best friends, and he thought it was absolutely hilarious because we have prank battles all the time.
That sounds like a wild road trip. I get the whole prank battle thing with friends. It's always fun to see who can one-up the other. Throwing random stuff in the microwave definitely gives you an edge. Glad your friend took it well, too. It's good to have that kind of humor in a friendship. Keeps things interesting, I guess. Just another story to look back on later.
Me and my older cousins would call my younger cousin retarded when we were kids. Turns out she was autistic. I feel terrible about it looking back. What makes it worse is that her parents were in denial for years about it. Always tried to play it off like she was just shy or needed a little extra help with school. She's actually a very sweet girl, and I'm extra nice to her when I see her nowadays. I just wish she was diagnosed earlier so she could have gotten the extra help she needed growing up. Sad face.
That's a tough situation. It's interesting how perceptions can change over time. Kids don't always understand the impact of their words. It's good that you've recognized it and are making an effort to be supportive now. Autistic people often need understanding, and it's a shame that she didn't get the help sooner. It shows growth on your part, though. Hopefully, she feels that support now.
I wanted to get petty revenge on my friend. He keeps his desktop at my house, so he doesn't have to deal with his bandwidth limit at home. I may have added some mods to his already heavily modded Skyrim. These include a laugh track that plays when he fails to pick a lock, spooky scary skeletons playing around skeletons, the spooky scary skeletons remix playing around Draugr, surprise motherfucker every time he sneak attacks. He plays rogue-like characters, Thomas the Dank Engine playing at the main menu. I'm still waiting for him to start up.
Sounds like a classic move. Just messing with someone's game to get a little laugh. I mean, adding a laugh track for failed locks? That's genius in its own way. I can just picture his reaction when he hears surprise during a sneak attack. You'll have to record his face the first time he launches it. Fun to see how these little pranks can create memorable moments with friends.
Ugh, I prank called this girl in my grade when I was younger, like 6th grade, and told her I was X. Well, apparently X was her best friend, and so my friend who was with me and I talked to this poor girl we pranked for like an hour, mostly about school and stuff. We thought this was the most hilarious thing in the world. She told us everything under the sun and talked shit about like 10 people in my grade over the phone to us, thinking it was in the confidence of her best friend. I like to think that she knew and was just messing with us, but I'm about 85% sure she didn't. I still feel pretty horrible about it, honestly. The girl was a little off, and I should have just been nice to her.
That's a wild story. We all did dumb stuff as kids. I think a lot of us have moments like that where we look back and feel bad. It's interesting how those pranks can have real consequences. Sometimes, the line between fun and mean can get blurred. In the end, it's all part of growing up, but it's good you recognize it now. Maybe it taught you a lesson about kindness.
I was mad at my brother. He essentially got me kicked out of my house. So I'm gathering up my things to leave, and I remember he had a 40 of Canadian Club under his bed. Bro was at work, so I transferred 3/4 of it into a water bottle for later consumption and then pissed into the bottle till it was full. Now, fast forward a week. I had time to cool off and think, and I had just remembered the piss. In my new state of mind, I kind of felt bad, so I went to check on the bottle. Dude drank like 30 ounces of my piss, and never telling him what I did.
That's a wild story. I get being mad at someone, but that's next level revenge. Honestly, it's kind of hilarious he drank it without knowing. Sometimes you just need to let go of that anger in a funny way. But yeah, keeping that secret forever sounds like a solid plan. Who wants that kind of story out in the open?
One time when we were playing on a playground, a kid was standing on these parallel poles that I was swinging on. Without taking a beat to think of the consequences, I decided that I would kick his feet to play the ever-popular Don't Fall Nerd game. I knocked his feet so perfectly off the poles that he rotated in the air like a rag doll and whacked his head on the left pole before being thrown by the impact, spinning the opposite direction now, to the ground. Nobody ever found out it was me, because the kid didn't remember falling. I spent my life becoming a huge nerd out of repentance.
That's a wild story. Sounds like you learned a lesson that day, even if it didn't hit you until later. It's interesting how actions can shape who we become. I guess we all have those moments that stick with us, often for the wrong reasons. At least you turned it around and embraced the nerd life. Sometimes the things we regret the most end up defining us in unexpected ways.
I was in an abusive relationship in my early 20s. When I got out of it, I went back to an ex/best friend from high school. And let's just say that it was not easy for him, or me, especially for him. I was a total mess physically, mentally, and emotionally, and he paid for it. I lashed at him for so long years, and used him as a punching bag until he got sick of me and told me I was one of the worst people he ever had the misfortune to meet. I took him for granted, and losing someone like him was a giant wake-up call. After years of therapy, I'm okay now, and I've turned my life around 180 degrees. I miss him being around, though. He's an amazing man and an amazing friend. I wish I could still share with him some of the happiness I'm lucky enough to be surrounded by. Edit. Spelling.
It's tough when past relationships shape our present. You went through a lot, and it's hard to realize the impact we have on others until it's too late. Sounds like you learned a lot from that experience, which is a big deal. It's good to hear you've turned things around. Losing a true friend can hit hard, especially when they were there for you during rough times. Wishing you the best as you move forward.
This kid I went to high school with, he found out that one of our new teachers was allergic to ingredients that are in Tylenol. So what does he do when she steps out of the classroom for a few minutes? Crushes nearly a dozen Tylenol pills on the table and stirs it into her hand lotion. Next period, she went to the ER because her hand was so badly inflamed.
That's a pretty wild story. It's hard to believe someone would go that far just to prank a teacher. I mean, affecting someone's health like that is a whole different level. Should have known better than to mess with someone's well-being. Makes you think about the consequences of those kinds of actions.
In 10th grade, a kid confided in me that he was suicidal. At the time, I thought the kid was an annoying troll, but it was really just me being an insensitive asshole. I didn't take what he was telling me seriously, and I think I may have laughed at him. Thought about it a few years later, and I felt pretty bad about it. He didn't commit suicide, but I still feel like a bad person for not being a better friend.
It's interesting how we sometimes underestimate what others are going through. That kid trusted you, and it's tough to realize later that you didn't respond the right way. People deal with things differently, and it's easy to misinterpret their struggles. It sounds like this experience really made you reflect on how to be a better friend, which is important. It's all about learning from past mistakes, I guess.
This is what happened to me recently. Memorial Day, I invited a bunch of friends over to mine and my GF's house for a pool party and barbecue. Everything was going fine until I went inside to smoke a little weed during the fiesta. My GF followed me inside and smoked with me, but she was really drunk, so the weed/alcohol combo made her extremely uncoordinated. She attempted to walk out of the bedroom and tripped and hit her head against the side of the door frame. I got her a towel to stop the bleeding. She was hammered, so the bleeding was pretty intense, and told her she should stay in until she sobered up a bit. What did she do? Runs outside telling everyone that I just hit her. Long story short, now all of my friends that were there think I am some sort of abusive boyfriend and have more or less shunned me from anything social.
That sounds rough. 1 minute you're hosting a fun party, and then things take a wild turn. It's hard when misconceptions like that spread among friends. It's tough to clear your name when people jump to conclusions, especially after a night of drinking. Hopefully, time will help your friends see the truth, but I get how frustrating that must be. Just gotta ride it out for now and keep your head up.
When I was recovering from surgery in 2006, I created a MySpace account with a few random pictures of a girl from a generic word search and went all out with her profile. I got a lot of guy friends immediately and started conversations with all of them. I set up a party at a local activity center one Saturday and watched as at least 6 different cars of guys pulled into the lot and walked in. I feel terrible because some of these guys legitimately thought they had a chance, but honestly, they were all too desperate and horny in their constant messages.
That's an interesting take on MySpace. It sounds like you were just trying to have a bit of fun while recovering, but it ended up being sort of a social experiment. I guess some people were really into the idea of connecting, even if it was with a fake persona. It's wild how online interactions can sometimes blur the lines. Those guys probably learned a thing or two about expectations.
Guys at my old job used to eat whatever food was left out on the counter. Didn't matter if it was your sandwich for lunch or a bag of chips you wanted to snack on through the day. One day, after an adventurous night out convincing my friend to try the local ghost pepper wing challenge, like a true Buffalo native, we had leftover wings he didn't dare try to eat. So I gladly took them and left them out at work. 3 men went home sick that day, and no one ever ate food off my desk again. One of them got some sauce in the eye when he went to rub the tears out. Didn't end well. Nor for the poor bastard after he went home who decided to take a whiz.
That's a wild story. It's funny how food theft can lead to such chaos. People learn their lesson the hard way. That moment must have been something to witness, especially with the eye incident. It's great you found a way to put a stop to the food snatching. Definitely made for some memorable workdays after that. Sometimes a little spice does more than just heat things up.
Roommate left out of town and told me specially to not drink his whiskey. We drank it, bought another bottle to replace the next morning. Nighttime comes, that bottle is drunk as well. Sunday morning comes, roommate comes home early and finds no whiskey, but 2 empty bottles of his brand. He was not pleased by our efforts to replace.
That's classic roommate stuff. You think you've got it all covered, but then reality hits. It's usually a game of trust and temptation. You try to play it cool with replacements, but when they see the empty bottles, it never goes well. I guess it's a lesson in mixing friendship with borrowing. At least you'll have a story to tell if it comes up again.
When I was 17, I shifted my truck into reverse instead of drive, stepped on the gas a little too hard, and slammed into the car behind me. I panicked and took off, never once thinking, oh, I should go back and apologize/pay for damages. Since this was my hometown, I drove by the house years later in a different car and saw like 10 different signs saying no parking. You will be towed.
That's a classic move. Mistakes like that can stick with you. You think you'll avoid it, but it sneaks up. Driving by years later and seeing those signs must have hit different, too. It's funny how life reminds you of past accidents unexpectedly. Makes you wonder if anything ever happened with the car behind you. Just goes to show, sometimes you learn the hard way, right?
In 4th grade, I stole my Uncle Max's toupee, and I glued it on my face when I was Moses in my Hebrew school play. In 5th grade, I knocked my sister Edie down the stairs and I blamed it on the dog. But the worst thing I ever done, I mixed up all this fake puke at home, and then I went to this movie theater, hid the puke in my jacket, climbed up to the balcony, and then, I made a noise like this, wah 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 yeah, and then I dumped it over the side, all over the people in the audience. And then, this was horrible, all the people started getting sick and throwing up all over each other. And I never felt so bad in my entire life.
That's quite the story. I can't imagine how wild that must have been, being at that theater while the chaos unfolded. Stealing the toupee and pretending to be Moses is something else too. Honestly, kids come up with the craziest ideas. It's funny how those moments stick with us, like that time in the theater. Sounds like a lesson learned the hard way, for sure.
Got all the kids in the neighborhood together to write a lengthy hate letter to the girl who lived next door from me. We were all about 7 to 8 years old. I just went around a circle and had them all list reasons why she sucked / we hated her. Then I put it in her mailbox. They knew it was me cause I was the only sociopath on the block apparently.
That's a wild memory. I remember doing something similar when I was a kid. We thought it was funny to send a letter to someone we didn't like. It felt rebellious, but looking back, it was kind of messed up. Kids can be cruel sometimes, not really understanding the impact. It's strange to think how those small actions shape who we become later. I guess we all have those phases.
My coworkers apparently did something like that for another coworker once. This lady must have been pretty gross, and a bunch of them took a collection and gave her a basket of deodorants, soaps, etc., and left it on her desk. This was a really long time ago, before I worked here. I doubt that shit would fly nowadays.
That's an interesting story. It's kind of surprising they did that back then. Nowadays, it seems like people are more cautious about how they address personal issues. It's easy to see how that could come off as offensive. I guess office dynamics have really changed over the years. Makes you think about how to handle similar situations more sensitively.
I did a similar thing when I had a guy friend in high school that did not brush his teeth. It was really bad. He just needed to know that people can see / smell that they didn't, and after that it was fine. I think it's the toilet paper on your shoe approach. They will be embarrassed, but glad they know to fix it.
I get that. I had a friend in school who always wore the same clothes without washing them. One day, I finally told him it was noticeable. He was embarrassed at first but ended up thanking me later. It's weird how a little honesty can go a long way. Sometimes, people just need a nudge to realize what's happening around them. It's all about helping each other out.
I accidentally did this to someone. I had a plastic water bottle filled with vodka in a cooler. My friend had a headache and needed to take some Tylenol, and thought he would wash it down with a big swig of water from my water bottle. Except he grabbed the bottle filled with vodka. Oops. I felt terrible.
That sounds rough. It can easily happen, especially when you think it's just water. It's a good reminder to label things clearly. Your friend probably learned a lesson that day too. At least you didn't let it ruin your day completely. Hopefully, he laughed it off later. It's moments like that which make you appreciate more careful choices. Just glad it wasn't anything worse for him.
I had a friend in middle school. We got into a fight, and he was talking shit. We threw down. I ended up catching him, and he turned and fell down on his hands and knees. I jumped on him and hit him a couple of times in the back of the head. I feel bad for it now. We remained friends as guys do. He told me every time I hit him, his vision blurred. I felt really bad about it.
It's interesting how things can escalate when you're young. I remember a similar situation with a friend. We had a disagreement, and it turned physical. Looking back, I feel bad too. It's strange how those moments stick with you. We laughed it off later, but you never really forget the weight of it. Friendship can survive a lot, but those memories linger in a way.
I grew up as the eldest of 3 brothers. My mom just gave up trying to keep us out of her snacks and treats when I got to high school. For reference, I was a defensive lineman on the varsity football team. My middle brother was playing linebacker on his middle school football team, and my youngest brother played midfield for one of the city soccer leagues. We also all did judo on the weekends. I still reel in horror thinking of the food bill.
Sounds like a chaotic but fun household. Having 3 brothers must have meant a lot of competition, especially with snacks. I can only imagine how your mom felt with the fridge always empty. Balancing football and judo must have kept you all busy and hungry. It's interesting how family dynamics shape our lives, even in small ways like food. The memories of those times probably make you appreciate a good meal more now.
Boyfriend's ex-girlfriend called the police and said he attacked her and punched her and was stalking her. She was scared and please arrest him. The police asked her, when did he attack you? Her, on the phone, said, just now. I'm hiding in a shopping center. I ran from him. Police went and collected her from the shopping center and took her back to the police station. What does she see when she walks in? Me and my boyfriend, we were there getting a restraining order against her because she had messaged him for the 19th time, if you don't have a baby with me, I will kill the little loser name and make you watch. We had been there for over an hour discussing options with the police. She was charged with wasting police time, and we were granted the restraining order. However, if we weren't there, I believe it would have been a different result.
That's a wild situation. It's good you both were at the police station. Seems like that girl really didn't think things through. I can't imagine how tense it must have been for you and your boyfriend knowing she was out there making those claims. It's a relief things worked out in your favor with the restraining order. Definitely an eye-opener about how quickly things can escalate.
I did something similar, except the outcome was different. My mom told me to clean the dishes, and I said, "You're lazy, do it yourself." I made a mistake. She started laughing, then said, "This is translated from Arabic. Look at you. Can't even clean a few dishes, calling me lazy." Huh. I graduated from college with a degree in law. Now here you are, sitting in a bed with the TV on, when you can't even get your grades above a C if your life depended on it. Before you talk trash, look at yourself. You have no room to talk.
I guess we all have those moments with our parents. I once joked around, thinking I could get away with it. But my dad just shut it down, pointing out my own shortcomings. It was a reality check. It's funny how they can flip the script on you. It always leaves you thinking, maybe the next time, it's better to just help out instead of talking back.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.